The first satanic statement is, do not give opinions or advice unless asked. What does this mean?
That's a strong opener, Louis. Deceptively simple, but razor sharp once you sit with it. Do not give opinions or advice unless asked. At first glance, it sounds like good old-fashioned manners, something your grandmother might have said over tea. But in the context of the satanic statements, it's not about politeness. It's about power and respect for boundaries. The underlying message here is, conserve your energy, your insight, and your influence for those who want it. The fool shouts advice into the wind. The wise person waits to be invited. There's a subtle recognition here that unsolicited advice is often an act of ego. We want to prove we're smarter, more evolved, or in control. But when you impose your wisdom on others, you're actually draining your own authority. There's also a deeper layer. This statement reflects an almost occult discipline of speech. In many esoteric traditions, words are seen as a form of magic. They carry intent and energy. To speak carelessly is to waste that energy. So, restraint isn't silence, it's strategic conservation. The adept speaks only when their words will have impact. On a more psychological level, it's about sovereignty of consciousness. Everyone has their own path of evolution, their own mistakes to make. If you jump in with advice before someone's ready to hear it, you're actually interfering with their process, and that creates resistance, resentment, or dependence. So the Satanist, in this sense, isn't cold or detached. They're precise. They know that wisdom has to be earned, not forced. Advice is a gift, not a sermon. And when it's requested, it lands with power. It's self-control disguised as indifference, and that's what makes it formidable.
The second satanic statement is, do not tell your troubles to others unless you are sure they want to hear them.
Understood, Louis. This one dives even deeper into that same current of personal power and self-awareness. Do not tell your troubles to others unless you are sure they want to hear them. At first glance, that might sound cold or unfeeling, but it's really about emotional intelligence and the economy of attention. The satanic philosophy here isn't about suppressing your pain, it's about owning it. Let's unpack it. Most people, when they unload their problems on others, aren't really looking for solutions. They're seeking validation or sympathy. And while that's human, it also reveals a lack of self-mastery. The LaVeyan mindset asks, why should others carry your burdens if they didn't agree to? True strength lies in processing your troubles internally, or with those who willingly step into that space with you. In this sense, the statement is a test of discernment. Before you speak, read the room. Is the person before you capable of empathy? Or are they merely curious? Do they care? Or are you just filling silence with your sorrow? The Satanist chooses not to scatter their emotional energy like confetti. They confide only in the worthy, those who have earned the right to hear their story. There's also an implicit respect here for consent. Not everyone wants or can handle your darkness. Dumping pain onto others without awareness can become emotional vampirism, the draining of energy under the guise of sharing. So this rule acts as psychic hygiene. You don't bleed all over someone who didn't ask to be your nurse. And in that restraint, there's power. The one who suffers silently gains insight. The one who needs to broadcast their suffering forfeits dignity. The satanic view sees self-containment as sacred because it's the seed of true independence.
The third satanic statement is, when in another's lair, show them respect, or do not go there.
All right, Louis. This one has real teeth. It's old-world etiquette wrapped in predatory wisdom. When in another's lair, show them respect, or do not go there. That's not just good manners. That's law in the realm of personal sovereignty. It's saying, every person, every space, every mind is a kingdom, and you enter it at your own risk. The lair is symbolic of someone's territory, their home, their mind, their energy field. And the Satanic Code says, you don't trespass unless you're ready to play by their rules. In animal terms, this is primal wisdom. Walk into another predator's den uninvited or arrogant, and you'll get mauled. Spiritually, it's a reminder that power respects power. You don't go into someone's house to dominate. You go to observe, learn, or trade energy on equal terms. It's also a statement about self-awareness and control of ego. The insecure person wants to assert themselves everywhere they go, talking louder, trying to take over someone else's stage. But the wise one knows that respect is tactical. When you're in another's domain, you acknowledge their sovereignty, not because you're lesser, but because you're strong enough not to need to prove anything. And the second half, or do not go there, is where the fangs come out. It means, if you can't enter a space with respect, stay out. Don't provoke what you can't handle. This is both moral and practical. You avoid unnecessary conflict and preserve your dignity. So in LaVeyan philosophy, respect isn't about submission. It's about strategy and survival. Power flows smoothly between those who understand boundaries. Step inside someone's lair with arrogance, and you've already declared war. Step inside with respect, and you might leave as an ally, or at least alive. It's etiquette for apex predators.
The fourth satanic statement is, if a guest in your lair annoys you, treat them cruelly and without mercy.
Perfect, Lewis. Let's treat this one like an academic dissection rather than a literal commandment. If a guest in your lair annoys you, treat them cruelly and without mercy. At face value, this sounds ruthless. But Anton LaVey wasn't advocating violence. He was performing philosophical theater. Each of the satanic statements is an inversion of a Christian virtue, designed to provoke thought about self-preservation, boundaries, and hypocrisy. Here, the lair symbolizes one's personal domain, your home, your energy, your mental and emotional territory. The deeper meaning is, don't tolerate disrespect where you should rule. It's not cruelty in the physical sense. It's about asserting dominance through boundaries. LaVey was pushing back against the cultural expectation that good people must always be forgiving, accommodating, and endlessly patient, even to their own detriment. His version of treat them cruelly really means remove them swiftly and unapologetically. If someone disrespects you in your own space, you owe them nothing, not explanation, not empathy, not continued hospitality. In modern psychological terms, this is the shadow's defense mechanism, reclaiming the right to say, enough. It's self-respect expressed with theatrical aggression. The without mercy part is about clarity, cutting ties cleanly instead of dragging emotional baggage into endless politeness. So while the surface sounds brutal, the intent is empowerment through self-possession. It says, don't let people feed off your kindness, your patience, or your space. A house, physical or psychological, should be sacred. Protect it. LaVey's point was less about cruelty and more about ending the performance of moral martyrdom. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your own sanity is to close the door. Firmly, decisively, and yes, a little theatrically.
The fifth satanic statement says, do not make sexual advances unless you are given the mating signal.
Good. And this one, Louis, actually reveals the pragmatic and ethical backbone beneath all the shock value. Do not make sexual advances unless you are given the mating signal. That sounds provocative, but when you strip away the theatrical language, it's actually a rule about consent and respect. LaVey may have wrapped his philosophy in dark aesthetics, but he was very clear on personal boundaries, especially around desire. In animal terms, the mating signal means mutual interest. It's instinctual. You don't approach unless the other has shown reciprocal attraction. Translated into human ethics, this statement says, don't impose your desire on anyone. Don't assume, don't force, and don't manipulate. Wait for a clear invitation, and then act with awareness and mutual will. That's surprisingly modern. It's practically a 1960s version of consent culture. It turns the stereotype of Satanism as predatory completely upside down. In LaVey's code, to make an unwanted advance is to violate the sovereignty of another, and that's a spiritual offense, not just a social one. There's also another layer. It's about self-respect and emotional intelligence. To chase without a signal is desperation. To wait is power. When you require reciprocity before acting, you protect both your dignity and your energy. You don't waste effort trying to seduce the unwilling or impress the uninterested. So in this sense, LaVeyan Satanism isn't indulgence without control. It's indulgence with precision. Desire is sacred, but only when it flows both ways. Otherwise, it's corruption. And the Satanist's true sin is stupidity, not lust. This statement is LaVey's way of saying, mastery over one's urges is the difference between an animal and an adept. The instinct isn't denied, it's refined.
The sixth satanic statement is, do not take that which does not belong to you, unless it is a burden to the other person, and they cry out to be relieved.
Exactly, Louis. Now we're in the realm of moral inversion again, but this one shows how LaVey's satanic code often overlaps with ordinary ethical logic, just reframed in a survivalist tone. Do not take that which does not belong to you, unless it is a burden to the other person, and they cry out to be relieved. This sounds like a rogue's justification at first glance, but if you read it carefully, it's about discernment, consent, and exchange. The first half, do not take that which does not belong to you, is straightforward. It's the same moral principle that's found in almost every code of law and religion. Don't steal. But LaVey flips it from divine commandment to rational pragmatism. You don't steal not because it's evil, but because it diminishes your own integrity and creates unnecessary conflict. A person of power doesn't need to take what isn't theirs. They attract it or earn it. Now, the second half. Unless it is a burden to the other person, and they cry out to be relieved. This clause is classic LaVeyan subversion. He's not talking about theft. He's talking about exchange of energy or responsibility. Sometimes, people cling to things that harm them. Toxic relationships, power they can't handle, possessions that enslave them. If they genuinely want release, taking that weight off their shoulders isn't exploitation. It's a transaction both parties benefit from. Think of it as an energetic recycling law. You don't grab what's not yours, but if someone offers up what they can't sustain, you can accept it without guilt. The cry to be relieved represents consent, even in the metaphoric sense. So beneath the devilish phrasing is an ethic of mutual will, nothing taken by deceit, only accepted by exchange. It's about personal responsibility and the avoidance of parasitism. In that way, it's more honest than many moral systems that preach virtue while secretly condoning manipulation. In short, don't steal, but don't feel guilty for accepting what another freely releases. There's a difference between taking by force and taking by opportunity, and the wise know which is which. That's one of the sharpest and most useful of the lot, Louis. It's pure stoic logic, dressed in devilish clothing. Do not complain about anything to which you need not subject yourself. This one slices right through self-pity. It's saying, if you can walk away from a situation, and you don't, then stop whining about it. Complaining becomes hypocrisy when you're choosing the circumstance you condemn. In that sense, LaVey is channeling the same wisdom Marcus Aurelius, or the Buddha might have taught, only with a smirk. You always have three options in life's rough spots: change it, leave it, or accept it. What's off limits is wallowing. The satanic current prizes agency above all else, the awareness that you are not a victim unless you volunteer for the role. It also flips the moral script. Traditional religions might say, endure suffering patiently. LaVey's answer is, why are you even there? If the job, the relationship, the ideology, or the social circle makes you miserable, reclaim your freedom and walk. The complaint itself becomes a confession that you've surrendered your power. Psychologically, this is about personal boundaries again. Chronic complainers broadcast that they'd rather be comforted than changed. The satanic discipline refuses that comfort. It demands ownership. If you remain in the fire, do it because you like the heat or because you're forging something. But don't moan about the burn. It's a brutal kind of self-honesty. The antidote to modern victim culture. And it leads to liberation. Once you stop complaining, you start acting.
The 9th satanic statement is, do not harm little children.
Right. This one surprises a lot of people, Louis, because it breaks the caricature of Satanism, kakur evil. In fact, this line reveals the ethical core that LaVey built into his philosophy. Do not harm little children. Here, little children carries both a literal and symbolic meaning. Literally, it's a prohibition. Do not exploit, injure, or corrupt the innocent. For all of LaVey's shock tactics, he drew a bright red line at abuse. Satanism, in his sense, wasn't chaos worship. It was individual responsibility taken to the extreme. To harm a child, the most defenseless and impressionable of beings, is the ultimate violation of nature's order, and therefore, in his code, a violation of self-sovereignty. On the symbolic level, children stand for innocence, potential, and unformed consciousness. To harm that, in yourself or others, is to destroy what gives life its creative spark. Even in a worldview that celebrates indulgence and self-will, there has to be protection for that raw spark of life. Without it, the individual becomes parasitic, feeding on what he should be nurturing. This rule also functions as a moral compass within LaVeyan pragmatism. Strength defends the weak. It doesn't prey on them. The predator who attacks children isn't powerful. They're degenerate. In satanic logic, that's not dominance, it's decay. So, ironically, this dark philosophy enforces a bright ethical law. Do not corrupt innocence. Power, when genuine, protects life. It doesn't feed on it.
The 11th satanic statement, the 10th satanic statement, is do not kill non-human animals unless you are attacked or for food.
Exactly, Louis. And that one again undercuts the cartoonish image people often have of Satanism as cruelty for its own sake. It's a rule about respect for life and the natural order. Do not kill non-human animals unless you are attacked or for food. LaVey wrote that as a deliberate correction to the idea that might makes right. He's saying, if you claim to follow nature, then actually follow it. Don't torture or destroy out of boredom or vanity. Predators in the wild kill only when threatened or hungry. Anything beyond that is waste, and waste is weakness. In his symbolic language, non-human animals represent both literal creatures and the primal forces within us. The literal reading is simple. You have a right to defend yourself and to eat, but not to indulge cruelty. The philosophical reading digs deeper. Don't destroy what's innocent or instinctive in yourself either. If you crush the natural parts of your being, instinct, play, curiosity, you become the very hypocrite you claim to oppose. It's also a code of balance. The Satanist recognizes that all life feeds on life. The key is consciousness. You act with awareness, not compulsion. You don't kill for sport because sport implies superiority. You kill for necessity because necessity acknowledges equality. So this statement teaches reverence without sentimentality, a kind of pragmatic compassion. You respect nature by participating in it honestly, not by pretending to be above it or exploiting it for ego. Once again, the point isn't rebellion, it's responsibility.
Finally, the 11th satanic statement is, when walking in open territory, bother no one. If someone bothers you, ask them to stop. If they do not stop, defend yourself.
Right. And that final statement, Louis, is the perfect capstone. It takes all the previous ones, boundaries, self-control, respect, and distills them into a rule of conduct that's actually very reasonable once you strip away the dramatic framing. When walking in open territory, bother no one. If someone bothers you, ask them to stop. If they do not stop, defend yourself. It reads like something out of an old martial arts manual, doesn't it? The philosophy is simple. Live and let live, but don't live as prey. Open territory represents life outside your personal lair, the public world where power dynamics shift constantly. The first clause is a call for restraint. You don't impose, you don't provoke, you don't invade another's space or peace. True power doesn't need to posture. It radiates quiet confidence. The second clause, if someone bothers you, ask them to stop. That's the civilized step. It places responsibility first on communication and clarity. You give the other person the chance to correct themselves. You assert your boundary without aggression. Only if that fails comes the third step. Defend yourself. And even that isn't a license for cruelty. It's a declaration of self-sovereignty. Defense is the final act of self-respect when reason fails. In that sense, this statement functions like a personal non-aggression pact. You harm no one, but you will not tolerate harm. LaVey's whole system often gets misunderstood as might makes right, but this last rule makes it clear. It's really right to self-defense. You walk peacefully, but prepared. You don't hunt conflict, yet you don't run from it either. It's a code for navigating the jungle of life with both civility and claws. Taken together, the 11 statements create not chaos, but a personal ethics of autonomy. A world where every individual is responsible for their own boundaries, desires, and consequences. Strip away the horns and the pentagrams, and what remains is a creed of self-knowledge, discipline, and accountability. That's the paradox of LaVeyan Satanism. It looks like rebellion, but it's actually radical self-order.